You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
And tonight's topic is setting boundaries sustainably without shutting down. It's an interesting process of setting boundaries. I think one of the things about boundaries that I misunderstood at the very beginning was I would make a boundary and then I would expect the other person to carry it out. Not realizing, oh, it's my boundary. I have to do it. I have to monitor it. I have to insist. Otherwise, the other person ignores it. But the one thing that I did want to say is we have changed the time that we're doing it to 1 p.m. on Thursdays, and we're going to make an additional change to the schedule. Is that the fourth Thursday of the month, I'm going to invite someone to come in and join the conversation. And so we're going to have a dialogue, and then you, of course, will still be able to ask whatever questions you want. And if they're a meditation teacher, I'll have them guide the meditation at the end of the class. And so on June 25th, Juliana Ray from Unified Mindfulness is coming. We're going to have a dialogue about Shinzen's work and Unified Mindfulness and what they do there. And then she'll do a meditation. How's that sound? We've never actually had anyone else here except for me, and so I thought it might be nice to have that, those additional voices. So, one of the things about boundary setting is that it's really based on consent. And when you talk about consent in relationships, in the secure range of relationships, consent is something that's considered. And in insecure and disorganized relationships, consent is not considered. I think, well, it's considered in a different way. There's usually a power dynamic in insecure relationships. And in disorganized relationships, because the children experience growing up where their boundaries simply are disregarded, it's very difficult to even remember to consider consent in terms of setting up boundaries. In the way that we develop secure functioning relationships, another way you might call secure functioning relationships is collaborative relationships. In collaborative relationships, the agreement is that I take care of you in the way that you need, and you take care of me in the way that I need, and the way that you figure out how to take care of me is I explain it to you. And the way that I figure out how to take care of you is you explain it to me, right? One of the things about taking care of other people is that you take care of them in the way that they need, but they're going to be relaying this to you based on their understanding of the way other people took care of them and how it worked or didn't work. And each person is unique in their capacities to provide care. So often when we talk about a collaborative relationship system, what we're talking about is discovering the way that the person that you're dealing with can take care of you rather than demanding that they take care of you in a particular way. Is that making sense? You're used to, maybe you had somebody who took care of you in a way that really was pleasing to you, and then you try to elicit from other people a similar kind or the exact kind of care that you receive, but they're not able to do it. And then there's a suggestion of lack there, when actually what we're attempting to do is to find a way that you can receive the care from another person, that they actually enjoy providing the care and that they feel comfortable and able to provide that. And then you collaborate with them in in how you want to receive the care. Is that making sense? In the structure of relationships, in those intimate collaborative relationships, an A relationship is somebody that you see and take care of on a daily or every other day basis. This is from the Robin Dunbar research. A B relationship is somebody that you see weekly or every other week. And they take care of you in the way that they need. And both of those are above the line, which means you're giving them a complete picture of what your experience is. And then below the line are C relationships in people who are of working age. Typically, that's 30 to 40 people. So one A relationship is the most common. 3 to 5 B relationships is the next. 30 to 40 C relationships. And there's a subcategory of C relationships, which is close Cs. So people you see monthly, let's say, Cs quarterly, monthly. And actually the C group typically is the group, if you're of working age, that are people who are also involved in the work that you do, so that you see them as a matter of course because of the work that you do. Close Cs, 10 to 15 of that, 30 to 40. And then D relationships are people that you see yearly, that you don't necessarily make plans to see. And E relationships are the 2D relationships. So the capacity for the mind to recognize 3D faces is extremely limited, say around 150 unique 3D faces the mind can recognize. But the mind has a much greater capacity to recognize 2D faces. We're constantly inundated with media. If you're like me and you have 5,000 friends on Facebook, if a lot of them stood next to you, you wouldn't even know who they were because they exist only in 2D. Or you know. I went to the movies the other night to see Kurosawa's Ran. Have you seen it? It's his adaptation of Lear. Anyway, it's the last big epic movie that he made, and I noticed that Titus Welliver walked by and sat down not too far from me. He's the actor who was on Bosch. Do you like L.A. Noir at all? Anyway, I happen to love the genre of L.A. Noir, going back to Chandler and James Cain. Do you know James Cain, the writer who wrote so much great L.A. Noir? I was actually in the Beverly Hills Library reading the compendium of all of James Cain, and one of the stories was set in Florida at Mar-a-Lago, and then it came over the news that Trump bought Mar-a-Lago. It was so disappointing. Anyway, I had met Titus Welliver before. But it was so interesting, that transition. So apparently there's a dimension of the E relationships, which is around 5,000 faces that you can remember. 1,500 of those you actually can associate a narrative to, and the remaining 3,500 you can accurately predict whether you've seen the faces before or not, right? Is that making sense? That's your capacity. Luckily, when it comes to close relationships, we're really talking about 4 or 5. That's all you need out of that. In telling them everything, of course, is that really, we don't mean that you pull out the scroll of every heinous action that you've ever taken in your life and you get them to initial by each vile entry. What we mean is that you're willing to tell them what your experience of the present moment is while you're with them, and that you give a complete picture of that so that they actually know you. They know what's going on with you. They understand what's going on with you. And this is the thing that, of course, opens up the potential for them to be able to take care of you. And part of that negotiation, of course, is what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable for you. Is that making sense? In those kinds of collaborative relationships where you make a commitment to be good at taking care of somebody, you do get something out of that, which is pretty profound, which is that the person who then is obligated to take care of you is in good shape to take care of you, right? That if you don't take care of the person well, then the person who's in charge of taking care of you is not in good shape to take care of you. And so you don't get good care, right? That's the thing. They take care of you, you're in good shape, you take care of them, then they're well taken care of, and then they take care of you in a way that matters to you. Makes sense. And so boundaries are pretty simple in that way. I mean, from that fundamental boundary of the comfort around communication, we all have a window of communication, I like to call it, where you feel pressure if you have to respond too quickly. The window is open for easy exchange, and then it's too long. They've waited too long to respond. And so the initial negotiations of boundaries are really around that. So hopefully when you lay the two on top of each other, your window of communication and their window of communication, there's an overlap of ease. But if there isn't, then you have to negotiate the boundaries of that, right? What is it like for that? How fast you have to respond? And some people, it's instant. If you notice that I have a friend who is in a long partnership with somebody, and the agreement that they have is that texts will be answered immediately. This would drive me completely mad. I just wouldn't be able to do it. But the irritation with him is that if it happens, we pull over and he answers the text. So we're sort of driving and pulling over, driving and pulling over. But it keeps the relationship in balance, and that's the agreement that they have. And so that's what happens, right? You're aware of what your boundaries are, you explain them to the other person, and you make an agreement about how they're going to be managed. And then you keep your agreements. That's one of the ways that relationships settle. You open up the topic of what the agreement is going to be, what the boundary is going to be in the relationship, and you negotiate it in such a way that it feels like a strong win on both sides of the boundary, both sides of the agreement. And if you do that, they tend to settle. You take seriously your obligation. They take seriously their obligation to you. And it unfolds in that way. The more you do it, the more settled the relationship becomes. Is that making sense? Now, the main difference between an A relationship and a B relationship in this structure is that in an A relationship, you both agree to put the needs of the relationship ahead of solo exploration. And in a B relationship, you agree that solo exploration is ahead of the needs of the relationship. That means in an A relationship where you've made that agreement, you would, if you want to do some exploration, primary or secondary, that would affect your ability to keep the agreements that you have in place, you would have to negotiate a change to the agreements so that you could accommodate the exploration. One of the examples I use is you're living in LA and you get the dream job offer that you've always wanted in New York, but for you to have to relocate to New York would, have an extreme effect on your ability to maintain the agreements that you have with the other person. Before you could accept the job, you would have to renegotiate those agreements in order to do that, for that to happen. I'm recalling working with a couple that the dream job came through, and the partner agreed to relocate, but that meant that they would be starting again in their work life, and they didn't adequately plan for how difficult the transition work-wise was going to be in the relocation, and it created a lot of friction in the relationship because it wasn't planned well. And it's hard to predict what will happen when you make changes like that. So is that all making sense in terms of boundaries? Sometimes we think boundaries are like with a cleaver where you're chopping things off, right? And what you find in insecure relationships, which are not so collaborative or disorganized relationships, the boundaries are ignored. And so you have to make them more rigid. The question is, would you say implicit or explicit? I would say that in well-negotiated relationships, it's explicit. Everything is explicit. Everything is agreed upon. And there's the caveat always for change. One of the things about negotiating durable boundaries, reliable boundaries, is that you try them out before you make a solid commitment to them. Let's try this and see if this works, that you feel cared for and I'm willing to do it, or I feel taken care of and you're willing to do it. And the more explicit it is, the better. And in fact, if it's a difficult negotiation, sometimes the best way to do it is to have a sheet of paper and write out ideas on it, and just leave it out in the space, so that there's you don't get shut down in the attempt to communicate, because it throws your cognitive mind offline and you're just in that rote state. I remember recently talking to someone, and I wanted to ask them to do something for me above and beyond the call of duty, and I was immediately plunged into this very primitive, childlike state, because the expectation of what was going to happen to me was totally not related to what was happening, but related to the experiences of, really felt like I was 3 or 4 years old asking for something. And the inability to predict what extreme range of responses I would get from my mother. And I was aware that I was not sitting in front of my mother and I was not 3 years old. But the feeling was very, very intense. And so I did all of my regulating stuff until I got to the point where I could say, would you do this for me? And the response was, oh yeah, I think I'd really like to do that. It was so surprising. So even, so easy. Now, if you're insecure, so we would talk about dismissing people, dismissing adults, of course, and preoccupied adults. It isn't such an easy, open negotiation of the boundary. It is something different, usually. There's a power dynamic in relationships that are insecure, that you might describe as unequal. One of the reasons that the power balance is necessarily unequal is because the quality of feeling safe. Now, usually we talk about insecure and disorganized relationships separately because of the dynamic difference. And so this is going to be organized attachment in a dismissing and preoccupied dynamic, which is the most common. One of the things that causes secure people to feel safe is if you are actively pursuing them, right? That's one of the things that they like. As long as you're coming toward them, they feel that you won't abandon them. And the way that they typically do that is they seduce you and get you intoxicated by the feeling of seduction. And then once you're intoxicated by feelings, that quality of engagement and seduction, they withdraw the seduction. And then you pursue to try and get the seduction more realistically, the proximity that you want from them so that you feel safe. So preoccupied people are oriented around proximity to their attachment figure. Often because the internal emotional state of preoccupied people is so chaotic, they match well with dismissing people who suppress awareness of their emotions. So it isn't difficult for them to be emotionally close to a preoccupied person because they don't feel the emotional dysregulation that they often experience internally. Makes sense. So the preoccupied person pursues the other person for proximity, and the person that they're pursuing, the dismissing person, withdraws from them so that they have that motion of being pursued. And what often happens in those relationships is that the distance between the two is stably negotiated implicitly, right? This is an implicit negotiation. And the reason for that is that the preoccupied person is no more interested in authentic collaborative relationships than the dismissing person is. So that the illusion often in the relationship is that we each would want a close relationship, but we can't be close to the person that we're in relationship to. Is that making sense in the description of that? So you might say that in collaborative, intimate relationships, the closeness is negotiated and the closeness is changing. And you're coming close when you both want to come close, and you're creating space for each other when you need to create space. Whereas in insecure, organized relationships, the space tends to be negotiated and both sides maintain the space. So that if the preoccupied person gets fed up pursuing and they stomp their foot and then begin to withdraw, then the seduction returns. That tends to be the dynamic of those relationships. One of the other things to really consider about this that I think is important is that if you aren't able to tell somebody authentically what's going on for you when they're supposed to be an intimate relationship that's above the line, then you obligate them to be in a fantasy relationship to you, right? We often can blame the other person for not being willing to be intimate in the relationship, even though we're not actually expressing ourselves authentically. Part of the dilemma of this is the abandonment terror. If we're so frightened of intimacy because of our experiences growing up, that the fear of abandonment exceeds the capacity for authenticity, we're going to be presenting ourselves in a idealized way or in a pretend mode way. I think that it can be confusing sometimes in talking about how these inauthentic presentations vary from the idealizing side to from the pretend side. I had a question from somebody about the quality of the way that we engage each other's mind states in these two different modes. And I'm going to try and explain that so that it's clear. In an involving presentation, you become involved and monitoring of the mind state of the other person so that you can understand what's happening with them. And in a pretend mode, which is the preoccupied side of things, you monitor the other person's mind state so that you can understand how you need to present yourself in order to get your needs met by the other person. In a idealizing mode, which is on the dismissing side, you monitor the other person's responses to see whether they're endorsing your point of view. Is that making sense? So that even though the monitoring is there, what you're actually looking for is different. In the preoccupied side, that monitoring is really about who do I have to become in order to get you to be interested in me? And on the dismissing side, you're monitoring their reaction to see, in some sense, if they're buying the narrative that you're offering, if they're engaging the narrative that you're offering, so that you can either seduce them or bully them into the purchase of that narrative, right? Dismissing people are very internally oriented, very organized around their own experience, and they generate narratives that describe that experience. And what they call on from you is to endorse the narrative. Is that making sense? That's very different than you trying to understand what somebody else's narrative is and becoming who you need to be for that narrative. That's why the two go together so well, right? The dismissing person is offering a narrative, and the preoccupied person is trying to understand who they need to be in order to endorse the narrative. And that's the thing that makes the relationships function. And if you get good at it, those relations can be quite stable, quite enduring. But what you also notice is a power imbalance there where the dismissing person is receiving the care and the preoccupied person is providing the care. And there isn't that collaborative mutual care that's happening. Boundaries in that relationship tend to be quite severe, or can get to be quite severe. The preoccupied person does not really track very well consent, and they don't really track very well boundaries that might be set up for them. If you look at a map of that in the secure frame, there's four aspects of it. You understand the meaning that you're giving to the present moment. And this is a really, in the way that I'm talking about it, this is really a fundamental difference than a typical Western psychological frame would be. In a typical Western psychological frame, in the process of creating reality, we're really creating it in this triangular space of mother, father, child, you might call it. And so that when we create the reality of the present moment, it's often informed in that kind of framework. The experiences of mother, the experience of fathers, and the experience of you in relationship to them is what creates the framework for meaning. And I think that the Buddhist framing of the creation of reality is quite uh, well. It suits me better in terms of my understanding of how things unfold, which is that we create meaning in the present moment based on the conditions, so that you have the capacity to sense the object that can be sensed. When there's contact, consciousness of the sensing experience arises. It's evaluated for urgency. Does it need immediate attention? Does it not matter if we ever get to it? Is there time for something pleasant? And then we compare the sensing experience, which is undefined, against the perceptual database of previously defined experiences. And if there's something close enough to the present moment experience, the whole memory thread of meaning attaches to it, and it rolls into conceptual reality. That is the meaning that we've assigned to the present moment. So that we're not suddenly dropping into a triangular relationship of mother, father, me. We are creating a reality that's based on the present moment conditions, the past, and then also our future expectation of what will happen. Is that making sense enough? We can easily see in the Buddhist model that we're not relating to a avatar for our caregivers, even though the early conditioning is from there. What we're relating to is the expectation of what will happen with the person that we're in relationship to. Is that making sense? I described that earlier with my experience of a sense of vulnerability in asking for something that I wanted, which was quite intimate for me. And that whole meaning thread attaching, which included all of those early childhood representations, but also lots of other things. And then moving in to the actual conditions of the present moment and responding there. Is that, are you understanding me as I'm talking about this? Um, when we get too caught up in and not mentalizing well enough, right? So in that first piece of the mentalizing where we understand what's happening, right? We understand that meaning thread is rich and has a lot of different pieces to it. Jules?
Oh, I'm sorry, you started a thought, so feel free to continue that, and then I can ask my question anytime.
Okay. um, the second piece of mentalizing, active mentalizing at a level that we need to, is what about the experience that's happening is the thing that you want to express to someone else. In that moment when I was wanting to ask something and I was plunged into the horrible 3-year-old experience of what could happen, I didn't need to go into a lengthy explanation of being 3 years old in front of you, expecting to be killed if I ask you this. I simply had to be able to ask it, right? So that's the thing, the understanding what is it about your experience of the present moment do you need to share? And then understanding how is it that you need to express it so that they will understand what you mean, which is a level of thought. You are unique in your conditioning and at the same time in a human form. If you're understanding this, you're conditioned to understand English, the English language as spoken by an American, so a particular brand of English. The idioms, I was talking to somebody from Bulgarian, I just threw out a sentence that had 2 or 3 American idioms in it, and they had no understanding at all of what I was trying to convey to them. Their response was, whatever that means. How do you communicate what you want to say in terms that they will understand what you mean? And can you validate that they actually understand what you mean? Because they're going to use their conditioning to define the expressions that you give to them. And you have to line them up to make sure that this is what I intended to express, and you've actually understood what I've intended to express. The third thing is that you then understand their response to your expression. Again, there's the validation. This is what they've said. This is what they mean. I understand that this means this to me. And is that the same thing as they intended to say? And then the fourth thing is that you adjust your understanding of the agreements, right? The boundaries of the relationship. You understand how that affects them. And you're constantly adjusting and keeping present in terms of the relationship. But if we look at how a preoccupied person evaluates that, since they don't mentalize fast enough to do all of that in each of the exchanges, they don't even really attempt to do that. What they do instead is they make the request for what they want, and then they see whether they get it or not. If they don't get it, they re-request in a slightly different way to try and get what they want, and they monitor whether they get it or not. And if they get it, then the cycle stops, and if they don't get it, they iterate again, looking for a response that they want. That making sense? So in a relationship that is that doesn't have the dynamic range of a collaborative relationship, and the mentalizing isn't as rapid and isn't as dynamic, where you end up is in a transactional relationship. And transactional relationships is you want something from me, then you do something for me. That's a transactional relationship. And it isn't the, now you might say in a secure relationship, it's transactional in the sense that I take care of you and then you take care of me. But the main difference between that is that it's the whole care, and the obligation is for you to take care of the other person. And I think a common example of what that means is that if I'm obligated to take care of you and you get sick with a bad cold and you can't take care of me for a week, that doesn't relieve me of my obligation to still provide care for you, right? Whereas in a transactional relationship, if you can't pay the piper, then the piper doesn't play. That makes sense. And so what you have the expression, particularly in long-term dismissing preoccupied relationships, if the preoccupied person gets sick, they're terrified that the dismissing person will move on from them because they're not able to provide the care. And the dismissing person often will move on from them because they're not able to provide the care. It doesn't come from nowhere. There's some prerequisite skills in being able to set collaborative boundaries that are durable, and that really is the capacity of mentalizing well enough and being emotionally regulated enough that you can actually engage in things that are emotionally intense. One of the things about adult relationships is that conflicts often can get quite intense. And if you can't regulate your emotions well enough to keep your cognitive mind online, you can't effectively negotiate or even come up with solutions that will work. And so you have to find a way to be able to do that. Of course, the first thing you need to do is see clearly that you would even want to do that, right? Why would I want to take care of someone else? This comes from the core of a dismissing person's experience of neglect in childhood, where nobody took care of them in that way. That wasn't ever the deal. We often can get into this idea that they know better and they're just withholding, right? But actually, they don't know better. That isn't how they understand relationships. That isn't what happened ever in a relationship that they saw. Quoting our esteemed leader, people who are engaging in collaborative relationships are suckers and losers. It's all take and no give on the dismissing side. And that feels strong, and it feels weak not to do that. It's an interesting dynamic. So the neglect of the child being neglected means that there's no collaboration, there's no training in collaboration, there's no understanding of collaboration. In order to get the care that you need, you have to perform this idealizing dance. And in exchanging your idealizing, you receive the care that you want. That's the dynamic that we learn from caregivers who insist on that. Now, I say insist, but what I really mean is who are conditioned in that way and represent to us what it is that we need to do. Preoccupied people, of course, it's not predictable in the way that it is for dismissing people. It's chaotic, and the caregivers are distracted and disengaged. It's very different from the neglect of someone who grows up to be dismissing. When you're neglected, it doesn't mean that there isn't a demand on you to perform in a particular way in the family system. There is. It's just that your particular unique needs are not attended to. You are in fact oriented toward performing in the way that the family requires of you. And so you do that. And if you do it well, you get rewarded. And so you learn the system of performance and reward. Jules.
Hey, George. So I have a question, but I'm going to see if I can articulate it. It's grounded in a personal experience. So, but going back to what you were earlier talking about, the levels of closeness and like A's and B's. The scenario is a friendship with a person who is polyamorous, and I generally, in my side of the relationship, have always assumed monoamory in terms of how I do my
that.
relationship. Yeah. Yeah, because it's not just monogamy, right? I'm not talking about marriage. I'm talking about the love and the intimacy part. So in any case, so I may have just made up that term. I mean, I've used it for a while, but anyway, it makes more sense. And when you talk about A relationships, like I know you mentioned that most people have one person in that A role in a relationship.
Yeah, that's the most common, but I think also it represents the monoamory predilection for culture.
Yes. Yes.
Polyamory people
And
can
so,
have an A, but they more often have just Bs without an A.
okay. So yeah, that starts to get at an angle on this. So that was part of it, is like that, those levels of closeness, but also what I've observed in the last couple of years as I've built some friendships with polyamorous people, and one that we were considering being a dating relationship. What I've observed, that at least people who I will say, do polyamory well, and do it ethically, are can be quite good at the communication aspects of what you're talking about.
Yeah,
The negotiation, the boundary setting, all of these things. Um, and I guess, so this is where I'm getting into trouble figuring out what my question is, but my experience is that it has been very challenging as a monoamorous person, to even negotiate and figure out a friendship, which I think we both wanted to be like at least a B friendship, a B
yeah.
level of closeness. But that has been very challenging, and I guess I'm just curious your thoughts on any of that, because I'm not, it's kind of come to this place of, I don't know if we can even be friends at that level
Right,
anyway, I should say, at that level, because there's a way that she holds close relationships, and I'm just going to use this word and it might not be great, but more lightly, more loosely. And this is all just based on my experience. It
right,
feels like she holds them more loosely than I want to be held. I want to be held more tightly.
right. So it's unusual, and I would say sometimes impossible for monogamous mono people to be with poly people for that reason. It's the dynamic is quite different. Sometimes poly people can agree to a level that would be a level of commitment and closeness and exclusivity that a mono person might want, but that it would come at a cost to them that they would have to be willing to do. But I don't, and I think that it would have to be on that side, because mono people, it's not volitional for them to be able to do that. It's kind of built into the structure of their orientation. And of course, there are lots of different ways in which poly relationships are structured, one of which is very common, where there is a central relationship that and then there's the dynamics of the openness outside of the central relationship. But really, both people have to be comfortable in that, and the boundary needs to be clearly defined, and each person needs to be really scrupulous in maintaining those boundaries in order for both people to feel safe. And I know people who've done that for 40 years, but they they the they're and in the same way that all relationships are working, where you're bringing the exploration that you're doing to the relationship, and it becomes fuel for the relationship. They're bringing in the adventures that they're engaged in, and enjoying it for each other. There's no jealousy or restriction that comes from that. And then often in those structures, there is no A relationship. It's just B relationships. And so you'd really have to discover from the person what kind of structure that they like, or there's even relational anarchy in the poly world, where there are no rules acceptable to somebody, and it's just a free for all. So,
And so in that situation, that like, because you gave us the definition of the difference between an A is the relationship that you place the relationship above either of your individual sets of needs.
right,
So
exploration needs.
okay, exploration needs. So would you say that it would be unlikely or uncommon that a poly person would have any relationships where the needs,
No,
the
I would say
exploration,
that
the
most
needs
of the long-term poly relationships I know are people who have A's, and they negotiate a relationship that is structured in that way, but it doesn't include a monogamous restriction in terms of involvement with other people, because there isn't a need for that. But monogamous people, it's not like that. They can't do it. It isn't flexible. The orientation between mono and poly seems to be a fairly fixed part of sexual orientation, and it's for mono people. They don't have the capacity to do it. It's like handing somebody a newspaper and saying, reading it to me, and they're saying, I'm blind. I can't
yeah.
read a newspaper.
There's a guy here in Portland that teaches, he's a sex and relationship educator, and he teaches a class called Date Your Own Species. And I think that's basically this metaphor that he's getting
Right.
at.
Yeah, you have to. People have to have the capacity to do it, and you have the one you have. It's kind of like that, I think.
Thanks, George.
Yeah. But I also think in the poly world, what you're also going to be confronted with is people who are not polyamorous. They're just commitment phobic, and that's a whole different thing. And you have to really work through that part to make sure that you're just not dealing with somebody who can't actually make any kind of reasonable commitment, and to see whether they're genuinely poly or not. Because I notice that a lot of people are not poly; they just can't commit. Dan,
how do you get to a place of knowing the value of being cared for, or having like negotiations about care, if neither person in the relationship has ever felt that kind of sense of being cared for in the relationship? Because surely you would need that experience to understand the value of it, wouldn't you?
no, I think that you don't. The You don't have to understand how you would feel taken care of. What you would have to be willing to do is broach the topic of a shared exploration. So you might say that I notice that I have in myself a deficit for understanding what kind of care I might want, or how that might feel, and I know that from my relating to you that you might have the same experience. Why don't we collaborate with each other and attempt to see what might feel like care? And what do you think, or what might you imagine is the kind of care that you want? And of course, we're not talking about the care that you didn't receive, because that's already lost. We're just talking about what kind of care you could receive now that would be useful to you. One place to start might be physical touch. What often, how do you retrain the body mind so that it can anticipate a kind of soft, effective touch that would be promoting of safety? And because people who are neglected don't develop much capacity for touch. In fact, it's often problematic for them. They don't necessarily understand how to be close to a body. They're not comfortable or engaged in the way bodies smell. They don't. It feels unsafe. All of those things. So how do you engage in a process of that happening? What is it that you long for? And this is the part that's really interesting. How do you allow yourself to feel safe enough that you would actually allow the defensing system of self to disengage enough that you would often inform yourself at the same time that you're informing your partner what it is that you've always longed for in terms of care? How do you do that? Which is, a sense of little by little and feeling safe. And that's,
I guess something I come up against is that like that kind of conversation turns really quickly into or is interpreted as I've done something wrong, or it's not good enough, or I'm not good enough, or that kind of dynamic, which never ends up in the negotiation of care. It ends up in a conflict.
well, I would that in kids that are role reversed, what you're describing is the instant role reversing, right? I'm asking you for care, and you flipped it in 2 sentences into me having to take care of you because you feel inadequate. It's role reversing, is what it is. And also, it's relieving them of the obligation of taking care of you, and it's. And so then you just have to address that actually what's happening is that you're asking for care, and that they've successfully role reversed you where you have to take care of them. And can they begin to mentalize that? Right? But that's maintaining the distance. You're inviting them to come close, and they're maintaining the distance. That's what's happening. So you have to be able to mentalize that fast enough. Invite them to take care of you, and hold your boundary, because if you acquiesce to taking care of them, then of course the distance is maintained and you don't get the care, and it feels impenetrable. But and also understand that the request to be authentic, when two people have agreed not to be authentic, if one person stops and says, I've changed my mind about this, I think we should be authentic, you need the consent of the other person to do that. They may not be willing to be authentic in return to your expression of authenticity. So that's the negotiation. Hell no. You're offering me authenticity? Hell no. Why do you think I've been in this relationship with you? You couldn't do it. I felt safe. Now you're changing
But what would
the
that
rules.
look like? Practically, what would that look like?
I'm inviting
What you just said.
I'm inviting you
Oh.
to do this. You don't have to do it, but I'm inviting you to do this. I'm not, in insecure relationships, you tend to threaten the relationship. Either you do this or I'm out of here, right? But instead, it's an invitation that you would like to explore how you might feel taken care of. And in exchange for that, I would explore how you might want to be taken care of.
Thanks.
Alex, you had your hand up. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I'll ask a question. Thank you. I was wondering about, how you say infants are auto-regulating.
Yeah.
So it seems to me if an infant is auto-regulating and their caregiver was kind of negligent, that wouldn't be a problem.
The thing about auto-regulating is it's very energy intensive, and co-regulating with another person is very economical energy-wise. So the cost to the child for auto-regulating are these extreme energy conserving actions, let's call them. So the infant who is put in a position of having to auto-regulate, the main thing that they do is they suppress awareness of emotion, and they suppress awareness of the attachment system, which has a very negative impact on the way that relationships will develop over time for them. And as soon as they're able to begin to explore, has a substantial restriction around their capacity to explore for meaning. And so the cost of that is terrible, is what I would say.
So they're not sustainably or healthily auto-regulating.
Well, they don't flourish. Let's put it that way. There's no capacity to flourish. There's no capacity, and this is, I think, something that's really fundamental. There's no capacity to become who you are in that dynamic. And you don't even notice that, really. You don't notice that you haven't flourished, that you haven't become who you might have been, until something intrudes in the auto-regulating defensive structure. And that's so destabilizing that you do everything just to squash it again.
And so you just mean like basically the way avoidance or dismissive people auto-regulate.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
The auto-regulating, and also in adults, 30% of dismissing people are substance addicted because they can't regulate it. That's a huge number. And disorganized avoidant people are 70% are substance addicted. It's, the price is staggering when you look at it. Even though when it's operating and you're all shut down, it doesn't feel like much. Then nothing does really.
Thank you.
Yeah. George.
Hi, George. So I want to get back to this. When is it role reversal, and when is it an attempt at, you could say, an attempt at repair, so to speak? To go back to your example earlier when you talked about asking someone to do something for you, but being triggered, so to speak, or terrified that they're not going to be able to. I ask you to. I know I've never asked you before, but can you make dinner tonight?
Right.
And my other knows, if I don't do this, I know he's gonna freak. He's terrified I'm gonna not do it. So I'm gonna say no. So I say, yeah, I can do it. I do it badly. He does it. He does it badly.
Right.
Or he forgets to make dinner. Now he has done what he was afraid would happen. He's triggered me in this fear. Now he wants to repair this dynamic. But by doing so, falls into the trap of, no, you have to take care of me because I'm really afraid you were going to get upset, and now I did get you upset. So now I need to be regulated because you asked. Do you see what I'm saying? Where I'm going?
Well,
but he wants to fix it. He wants to fix it. Does that?
Yeah. The initial thing is the concern and the expression over the ask is not expressed, right? It's just agreed to. So the first inauthentic expression was the agreement to do the thing.
Right.
That's actually where it went off.
That was inauthentic. Yeah. That was a pretend.
Right.
They say, sure, I can do that, not being sure that they can do it, or thinking they can do it, but can't. Pretending to be able to, yes.
To do it. And then what ends up happening is that they can't do it.
Right.
Now,
how do you fix that?
Well, that whole conversation needs to happen. I agreed to do it, but actually, when I really examine it, that's where it went wrong.
Mm.
And then the consequence that it unfold all the way along the way because I couldn't actually represent it authentically. And then what was then the consequence of that for the other person, which is also needing to be considered. What happened, what was their side of the experience, and then coming into a place where you're agreeing that you're going to be authentic so that those kinds of representation, those kinds of events don't happen. But with the preoccupied person who just acquiesces and agrees to doing everything, this is not an uncommon experience where they don't actually do it because they don't reserve the resources that are necessary to do each of the things that they agreed to do. And then there's usually some minimizing of the consequences of that for the other person. So that's the dilemma. But this is the other dilemma. Most people will accept from you what you say as the authentic experience, and when it isn't,
That's right.
then it undermines the trust, and that's really the thing that in the end needs to be repaired, and that is the thing that is not volitional, really. When epistemic trust is broken, then it isn't an agreement of repair, it's an experience of repair that happens over time.
Gotcha. Okay.
Would
Thank
you like to
Thank you.
meditate for the last 20 minutes or so? It is cherry season, and I can tell you that it's been a hard season because the cherries are all really small. I don't know if you've been to the store, but some years when it's a great season, they're really plump and big. The bings are pretty good, but the yellow ones are not so good so far. We'll see.
They're good in Italy.
I bet they're. Look at that thing.
Wow.
Ay, ay, ay. All right, let's do some loving kindness. Let's go ahead and settle in. Okay, let go of the meditation. So thanks, everybody. It's really good to see you. I offer the teaching freely, but I do hope that if you're resourced and you can make a donation, that you will help support me and also the work Mettagroup is doing. I put a link into the chat. Anyway, we're very happy to have you, whether you donate or not. It's just if you're resourced and can, it's appreciated. Good to see you, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you. Bye.